Hi, and welcome to another podcast by Ian Wallace, the Messed Up Counsellor. What I'd like to look at today is a situation scenario that we often get involved with counselling, is requests for information. And sometimes requests for information that would be provided for authorities, professionals, organisations, the law, the police, courts, financial kind of processes, which might be around benefits or claims around PIP. Now, by and large, I don't get involved in that, and that sometimes causes a bit of a problem for the people I work with, because they sometimes kind of think that it would be helpful for them, and as they're obviously paying me to do the work, then I should follow that request. That was going to be helpful for them. Depending on what that disclosure is of information, it comes under our confidentiality agreement that we get with every client, and we agree as we do the work. So I won't share anything with any third party unless I think that there's some form of risk that's possibly going to happen or is happening. But when people come to me and they do a piece of work and then they request their notes, which they can do obviously nowadays, then the notes that I make them aware that they are very, very, very small amount and they don't give any detail. So my notes will be looked at communication, talked about family, and those kind of processes of what we did, but no detail of what was talked about or what was exchanged. And I do that for two reasons. One is that I want to hold the confidentiality for the client, so anything I write could be subpoenaed by a court or the police, and that then wouldn't necessarily always help the client. So I tend to do it for that reason. And the second reason is that if anybody got hold of this information that I keep, then that might actually be detrimental to the client as well. So I tend to write very, very small amounts, 2 or 3 lines, in the way I've suggested. Now, for some people who are going through some family court issues, divorce, situations of disagreements with some professional bodies, then they would like to use our sessions for their benefit, which is understandable. But again, once I explain to them, and if it's a legal proceedings, that whatever information I was going to give would be available to the other party and the other kind of side of this disagreement or this process, then they don't see that as being helpful. They usually believe that they will get the information just for them and nobody else, which is not usually true, because somebody will assess that information or use that information in the way that they are presenting their case. So it's a case of education for the client in some senses, and being aware of that awkwardness, rejection kind of process that the client might go through by not being able to use whatever it is that I've constructed. So there's a lot of conversations, talks, and different opinions of this quite naturally, and I can only give you my opinion. But the reasons I use that process in not disclosing information is usually for the clients, not for me. Nothing I put down on paper could be held responsible to me, because I don't put that much down. But the clients would feel possibly rejected in this process. And when we're working with that as a counsellor, for me personally, I will ask and kind of be curious around what it is they're looking to achieve from whatever disclosure they're asking for, and whether or not I'm the most appropriate person to give that, because as a counsellor, I don't diagnose, I can't diagnose mental health conditions, for example, because I'm not trained to do so. So from that point of view, nothing I usually put down would be any form of assessment any form of saying this is this or that is that. It would just be the client's input, with me not giving any assessment, any judgment, professionally or not, as to what the client's state of mind is, what the client's situation is. And usually the client, once I've explained the reasons why, they usually are okay with that, because they haven't looked at the wider aspect of whatever that disclosure may or may not mean. So getting them to approach a professional who can give that assessment obviously is very important. So trying to work out who would be the best person to do that, whether that's a solicitor, a GP or mental health organisation, something or somebody who is used to working in that way, would be helpful. So when you get a request for any information, any report, any assessment, you have to think about your appropriate professional, educational aspect of whether or not you're able to give that assessment, because you might not be trained to do so. And the second is, how would that benefit the clients in the wider context with anybody else getting that information, such as a body, organisation, the government, anybody, solicitor, anybody that may use that against them. So yes, you will get requests. We do get requests, and requests for information about the sessions can be given to the client, and the client then can give them to anybody. That's their right. But if we report or we write, then for me it's not something I'm trained to do, as I've said, or I see would be very helpful. So have a think about when you get requests, or when you ask for requests for information about these things. If you are a counsellor or a therapist, please don't hold that on your own. Any information request that a client asks us, or police, or any governing body or organisation, then we should really talk to our insurance company, because they hold our legal status with information and what we do, and that's why you pay them. And they may have a view on whether or not disclosure would be a good idea as well. And if you ask them first, then you'll get their idea, because if anything did go wrong with your pear-shaped, or if you were held accountable in some way, shape or form, then your insurance company would be what was backing you and making your case to whoever or wherever. So talk to your insurance company, talk to your supervisor, obviously, and check things out before you do anything. A long time ago I was put on the spot on a telephone call by somebody purporting to be from the police, no idea if they were or not, and asking for information about a client I'd seen a year previously who was in some kind of domestic violence assessment, and I'd seen him as a couple apparently. And I told the person on the phone, that my information would not necessarily be helpful, and the reasons why. Well, small amount I write and what I write, and B, that actually she would have to put that request in writing. I was not going to give any information over the telephone, definitely, and I was not going to give any information, written information, to anybody without the client's agreement, obviously, because it's their information. Confidentiality is paramount in our work. And B, that I have no idea if this person on the phone was actually a police officer. And they assured me they were, and they gave me a badge number. And I said, well, that's not really necessarily going to be helpful in this situation. And they said, right, okay. I never heard anything else from them. So sometimes solicitors, sometimes the police, sometimes governing bodies will put us under pressure to disclose, and it's really not necessarily helpful to make instant decisions about that. Think about it, talk about it with other people, as I've said, your insurance company and your supervisor, and the client, obviously if you're still working with them, and then have some kind of informed decision and choice. Hopefully that's been helpful in a very awkward process that we get involved in sometimes, and it gives you things to think about and ways to have a look at things and possible ways to support you in getting those kind of situations, scenarios looked at, talked about, and made some decision about. If you enjoy these podcasts, please subscribe and share with other people, because you never know if that's going to be helpful to somebody else within your social or family network. My name's Ian Wallace. I'm the Messed Up Counsellor. Take care. Enjoy.